Welcome to Illuminated by Morehouse, a conversation series through which the college brings the discourse from its hallowed halls to the digital world to spark intellectual conversations, challenge perspectives, and make an impact. Today's discussion will explore the rich history and evolution of admissions at Morehouse College. We are joined by the directors of Admissions and Recruitment and Freshmen and Seniors Academic Success, who will offer unique insights into how admissions process has evolved in response to recent Supreme Court decisions on affirmative action and what the future holds for admissions at Morehouse College. I am Cameron Nolan, class of 2021 alumnus, the 89th Student Government Association president, founder of the Campus Content Creators, and the current content manager here at Morehouse, and I am the guest host for today's special episode of Illuminated. I'm joined today by two incredible gentlemen, Mr. Michael Gumm and Dr. Illya Davis, who I will let introduce themselves now.
Yes, my name is Michael Gumm. I serve as the Director of Admissions for Morehouse College, proud member of the class of 2010. Some amazing things that I believe in and the things that made Morehouse special all stemmed from my older brother being class of '04. And just watching Jay as he moved and as he built himself, I wanted to be in that same image of a concentrated professional leader, a trailblazer, and all these adjectives that would lead to a man who understood who they were and where they were trying to go. And I feel that in ways that Morehouse, we're able to do that by looking and defining and figuring out who's the next best great leader coming into the college. So, I would get my degree in philosophy from Morehouse and graduate in 10, continue that opportunity to get educated amongst the AUC, the Atlanta University Consortium of Clark Atlanta University, and then getting that doctoral degree and starting that career path and pursuing a PhD at Clark as well. So the opportunities are endless, and something about Morehouse and the fabric of it is to continue to help you strive to be something more than where you are today. And so that's just a little bit about myself.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Illya Davis. I'm a 1989 graduate of Morehouse College, where I majored in philosophy. I now serve as the Director of Freshmen and Seniors Academic Success. I am excited about being here and participating, mostly because I have opportunity to express my love and my undying commitment to Morehouse College. And it's not without foundation. I believe that Morehouse gave me reasons for living, and it inspired me to want to contribute to the development of other students. So it's a privilege and an honor to be able to be back at Morehouse and to do for others what had been done for me as a student.
And I love how you framed it as what you've done as a student or what you did as a student, because as alum here, we've all seen the Morehouse experience change, and all in different classes. I'm class of 2021 myself. So I want to go into how has the historical nature of Morehouse shifted over these few years as it relates to admissions specifically, whether it be from what you saw during my admission cycle or something that you saw while you were also in school?
Yes. The amazing thing about admissions and the focus of admissions has always been to try to recruit the very best, to get the right student into the college, and to open the doors for, in many ways, black men who don't have the opportunity to hear about an HBCU, or black men who don't get the opportunity to even be able to walk the campus, to be able to expose them in such a way where they can find themselves really being an anomaly, right? Being separate, being in this sort of space where you don't get the norm. To see you and a successful you, and to see that in a magnitude of about 2,000 plus students, that was always something that was the goal. It's just, who do you go after? Would you go after the diamonds in the rough, those guys that typically might not have the funds to be able to make it happen? Or do you go after the top student that, is going to graduate valedictorian in their class who attends a private institution? So in many ways, what's been historically shifted is this sort of balance and fight between both. Who do you go after and who do you seek? And I think as it relates to admissions, it's always been an opportunity to really recognize, whether you look at the past or even future, the reality that it's about cost. It's about finding a way to sort of bridge the gap and to close that gap. And unfortunately, we're just in a space, man, where either you're going to have the funds or you're not. And so I think as we progress, the college has to think differently about how they want to support students, and then how do we find new avenues to continue to bring some of the best to the college, as we've done in the past.
I'll turn it over to you as well.
So admissions, when I was a student, was quite interesting. I believe that many of my classmates were excited about Morehouse. And so it wasn't, as we now understand many people's disposition, the other school or the one I only got accepted into. Many of my classmates applied to one school, and it was Morehouse College. And we appreciated the opportunity. Not only was it considered a great school, we reveled in the fraternal nature of the institution. And many of my classmates, coming from all over the country, celebrated the uniqueness of being Morehouse College. I grew up in Atlanta. I didn't know much about Morehouse. My eldest sister had attended Clark College at the time. She was in the honors program there. So I spent my time literally across the street, never realizing Morehouse was here. But she, along with my mother, once I became of age, graduated high school, both of them decided that I was going to attend Morehouse College. And I say they decided because it had not registered that that's where I needed to be. So admissions for me was something that was promoted by my mother, as well as my classmates. Many of them, they came to Morehouse not because maybe their father or brother attended, but because people in their community had great respect for the institution. And someone at their school probably put it in their ear, this is a place I think you need to go. And it was always motivated by other people seeing something in that potential student, that contingent student. And they would literally say, I think that's where you need to be. So the guys in my class might not have been at the top of their high school graduating class, but when they came to Morehouse, they performed. So because I teach here and interact with students so often, I have to tell them, on paper, you all are much better than we were. In practice, we did better because we took our opportunity at Morehouse to sustain us and to be understood as this is our opportunity. Everything in the past has gone away. It's now your time to become someone new. And so admissions for us in the 80s, it was our opportunity to prove our value for ourselves, not for others, but for ourselves. And then later on, as I started to teach here, I saw differences in the types of students, equally as good, but they were different. They had been prepared in the basic structures of education. And so I think coming to Morehouse, we had to imbue in them another sensibility, and that was the value of lifelong learning and not the reduction of education to utility. So it was very important to get the newer student to realize it's not reducible to, will I get a job? We constantly want to encourage students, will you see yourself becoming a better human being? Not immediately, but protracted. Will this help me understand what's needed to be a better person? So the students we get now, not better or worse, they're different. They have a better foundation in the basics of education, if you will. But as we did and they do now, we still need to focus wholeheartedly on how do you cultivate your humanity and make a contribution to society.
Morehouse does not like to remain stagnant. Morehouse is progressive in the nature in which we critically think about the ways in which we're responsible for how the next 150 years looks as we are, walking on this earth. So I want us to establish the conversation regarding what's going on with the Supreme Court, all of the things that are going on with affirmative action. And I want to give it over to you first, Brother Davis, to go into that conversation about what is the affirmative action? What was that ruling? Like, what are those, like, if I was unfamiliar with it, how would you describe it to me so we can have more intangible conversations for our audience?
So at bottom, as we love to say, this is an issue of morality and the type of world you wish to live. So when the Supreme Court last year decided that race would not be the fundamental guiding principle of admissions, and I'm being hyperbolic to represent the fact that there are many other variables that could have gone before the Supreme Court, the state I'm from, and I think part of what they do, they crafted it in such a way that they understand region is a part of affirmative action. They understand ethnicity, but for some interesting reason, in a country that predicated enslavement of people on race, now decided that they would exclude it as a formidable part of admissions into some of the schools that never wanted you there. And so I think any school that cares about caring for individuals who have, for the most part, been marginalized historically, and the products of that marginalization manifest themselves in an asymmetrical social, political, economic structure, that you have to make that decision. So I never really worried about affirmative action as much as whether or not the schools who have to formulate admissions under that mandate, they have to decide, I still want my student body to look a certain way, to be a certain way. Women had to fight against it. Gay brothers and sisters, trans brothers and sisters now are going to have to live through it. Because as you build, as brother, I won't want to speak in his area, but as you build your student body, you now have to consider, when we have trans students, is that a variable we care enough about to try specifically and intentionally to incorporate in our community? So the interesting thing is this. There are enough great high schools in Northeast U.S., they never have to go anywhere else for students. There are probably about 15 to 20 schools that they could populate their entire college on. They never have to leave. So you start saying, well, what is it about affirmative action and about making considerations of race, gender, sexuality as a part of your formula to create a profoundly robust intellectual environment? You have to decide, I intend to create an environment where the education is not reducible to the class, but it also transpires between the students. So even when I went to graduate school at predominantly white universities, their promotion was, we wish to have that type of diversity. And so what they will argue is that we didn't restrict race. What we said, it could not be a fundamental component in your decisions of admissions. So now what do? They decide that they're now going to let individuals account for their experiences, which may have come from a predominantly black environment. So you can account for it in your statement of purpose. I grew up in a particular environment. And then what they'll do is they'll extract from those experiences, oh, this is a black candidate, right? Which I think is duplicitous. Be honest. And so they lose the honesty, or as I said, it's a moral issue. So we create the type of world we wish to live in. And so the Supreme Court said, we don't want a world where we understand what race means on the ground. Because one of the most off-putting statements is when people say, well, race is just socially contrived. Well, so is the stock market. Right? But you don't consider that to be non-real without implications that change the material conditions of people's lives. You don't do that. But when it comes to race, of course you do, because there's a lot more there. So for me, what they decided was a side issue when you consider the moral issue. The moral issue is, what type of world do you want to live in? Do you want to account for the specific types of hurdles and barriers that have played a fundamental role in how people have been constituted, such that you're going to intentionally try to engage them in such a way that you are now representing the fact, I understand. Lastly, think about our indigenous brothers and sisters. We do have certain regulations based on the state you're from that they're going to target them. And I think that's absolutely appropriate, because you understand how they got to where they are in the world and certain social harms that have fundamentally followed them. So what do you say? We're going to look for certain specific groups because we want to now, you can't change history, but you can fundamentally decide what your future is going to be. And that's where I engage this. It's a moral issue. And if people want to engage it from a political standpoint, okay, but know that it is moral.
Mike, from an admissions perspective, when your team first heard the news that the Supreme Court was going to make this ruling, was the original thought process like, oh my God, this is doomsday. This is something that could be problematic for the way in which we attract talent, recruit students, or was it an enlightenment? Was it something where we said, hey, from a college, we can do this, this, and this to, better the experience for that young, eager black student from Mississippi that wants an opportunity, is eager for something? How has that changed in your office, and what was those initial conversations like?
It's an excellent question. So, and Professor Davis is spot on, because when we start really looking at the SCOTUS decision and what it affects, right, there's some things that lie outside of that we don't want to talk about, like free and reduced lunch. But I'll say this, right? When I think the first initial conversation was, does it affect us? Are we going to see an enrollment decline before the decline, right? Will there be an issue of race, and is it an issue that Morehouse has seen as Morehouse has transitioned and has supported students that might not be from the same racial background? I think as it relates to our office, our focus was very pivotal on doing what we do best, talking about the college, steering conversations, trying to find the right student for the right reason, and be able to still do what we were continuing to do, which made us very successful. Outside of the SCOTUS decision, our application process was not any different. We still looked at the same criteria that we looked at prior to. As it relates to our legacy of Morehouse men that send Morehouse students to us, that didn't really shift at all as well. So race really in many ways didn't play a factor, at least on the recruitment side. And as we know, with the policy in place, was not something we were really looking at in that way. What I will say, however, is there's been, I think, a post effect, right, of families that now are saying, because of the rejection in one regard, would a space like Morehouse be better suited for my son? So I think as we kind of see our first class, as the numbers kind of roll in, and as we've had in the second season now, become a May 1 school, meaning we hit our deadline or hit our goal by May 1st, and as the seams of admissions at Morehouse is robusting and is carrying, we're finding that there's families, right, that are saying to us, I know he was interested in this school, in this school, in this school, but there's something special about Morehouse. And I just don't know if that same family would have came into the office prior to SCOTUS. What I will say is that Morehouse is a high demand institution with a lot of focus on helping build young black men. And with that understanding, by the nature of the type of institution that we are, families desire to want to put students in that environment. And so we've been able to thrive on that. And I think we've been able to shift the dynamic. And simply put, not to give too many things away, that rain can't stop the house. So in many ways, we get many things thrown at us. And, it was hard just during the pandemic of COVID-19 to try to shift professors that are typically used to being in a certain environment where they had their chalkboard and they're writing in cursive on the chalkboard to now, how do I translate this activity of having this amazing professor who's been teaching for over 30 plus years now have to shift to a dynamic where now he's in front of a computer and speaking to his class through a Zoom platform. We do it here. And I think that that's what made Morehouse special. I think for us, it's about changing, it's about shifting, but it's not about changing the fabric of who we are. It's about understanding what's happening around us and being rationalists, right? And being able to utilize our ability to reason to determine what's necessary in the moments that we find ourselves in. And for us, that's in every decision that we make. So what's been really amazing about us is, post the SCOTUS decision, and now with an amazing class, we've been able to really have an admit rate of about 43%, where we're finding that students are busting in the seams saying, I want to be in this environment. But more so in terms of numbers, be able to say that, we brought in more applications than the past 3 years for the college. And so, to be at 6,000 applications with 2,400 students that have been admitted to then walk in a class of about 700 allows for us to be able to be in a space that continues to do the things that we're doing. When we talk about the numerics and we're talking about GPA bands, we've been able to quickly, right, in many ways, position ourselves to be at a space where we can say our average GPA is right at about a 3.7. That the typical student is going to take at least 4 AP courses and has done 50% of that group has at least done dual enrollment. There's just a different caliber of student that's walking into Morehouse, and more conversations pushed us to a point where we decided to go early decision, ED, right? And the reason and the rationale behind that is because we knew that the quality of student that desired to want to be here is also the same quality student that could have applied to the PWI, but there's just something special about the environment at Morehouse that we wanted to be in the front of that. For some of us, it's not about 4 or 5 different choices. I have one choice, right? And whether that was pushed or whether that was something that's innate in you, something happened for us to say that we didn't need to wait to hear from any other school. The only school I want to hear from is Morehouse. And so I think in terms of that allowed us to be in the space. And so for us, we grew while other colleges might have fell off, right? For us, we've been able to have an amazing wait list of students that has said, hey, I want a spot, I want a seat. And to be able to say, that we're at a space where we're not closed, that we don't have to worry about if the grass gets cut, if we don't have to worry about certain things, just talks more to the times that we're in and the reality that Morehouse is here to service students the best way we know how.
Knowing the nature of Morehouse's admissions, because I have a front row seat in my current role, knowing that our admittance rate is consistently going down, and that's for the grade of the college, right? And you talked about where you've seen the trajectory of Morehouse students and the different types of students. So my question now is asking, are we still looking at Morehouse as this incubation space where we're looking for those diamond in the rough students to develop you as a black man, as a black leader? Or are we now more so tailored towards a high profile, if we will, a high achiever, someone with that high academic rigor? Are we looking for more of those students? Like, how has that shifted over the course of this Morehouse experience?
Great question. When you take the balance, right, between both, I think Morehouse in many ways strives to do both still. And we have to be competitive. So there's a high expectation to be the #1 HBCU, to get the right application, to have the quality to be able to say that you're highly selective. And we know those thoughts that appear behind that concept. But in relation to the desire Morehouse has, I think by nature, right, a student raises their hand and they say, I want to be in this environment. I want to be at Morehouse. And what we try to do in admissions is to see just how would they fit with us, right? So it's about looking at fit. It's about understanding what they bring, right? The idea of the application is to stand out, not to just list everything you've been a part of, because everybody's been a part of them. It's great that you're a part of FBLA or National Honor Society or the Black Student Union, but what else sets you apart is the definitive metrics, right, that we then try to see. If I was to drop this student off right now, could that student perform? Could he do well? And so I lean on our faculty and our student side to really engage in a conversation about what type of student needs to be here. And so I think that shifted over time, where it was not just about the numeric or just your GPA, right? Morehouse has moved test optional. So there's no set standard of an ACT test score that gets you admitted to the university. And of course you hit averages, right? But the reality, I think more so, again, is what type of student will stand out. And so for us, we're going to go to the south parts of Chicago and recruit, right? We'll find ourselves going to the Philip Exeters if we have to in Connecticut. But the reality more so is we want to look at where our students are, right? Where do we have strong connections? Where's our counselors that have been sending students and cultivating a relationship over years? And then how do the students they send us match to be able to get a student that can graduate in 4 years? If we're not doing that, then we're off track. And so we're finding nuances and new ways, maybe to bring in faculty to have more conversations, to do more surveys about the current class, to determine, what was that class makeup? So starting at the end and moving backwards, right? Dialogues like this, which allows us to create a platform to talk about admissions, so it's not some closed silo, right? But opportunities such as that to be able to really kind of shift to the type of quality of student we want. So we still go after all. We want the student that wants us. And we do that by 3 different periods of engagement, right? 3 periods of opportunities for them to actually be admitted to university, of early decision, which tells us that a student that desires Morehouse, we want Morehouse, so letting that student know early, right? Early action, right, which says, hey, you might have a top 4 schools on your list. That's great, as long as Morehouse is one of those, right? And then regular decision, right? You might need some time to make up your senior year. Well, we definitely don't want to lose you for whatever reason. You might not have known the application process, let alone you might be a first-generation student. So for us, it's about meeting those students where they are and slowly but surely trying to engage and extract who deserves to be here the best way we know how.
And in your experience, dealing with first-year experience, have you seen a shift rather of those different profiles of students? Like, do they carry themselves differently in first-year experience? Are they having different types of conversations, right? We know the banter that we normally have on Brown Street or anything. So are those conversations shifting? Is the mindset shifting? Like, what has your experience been like?
It's probably as variegated as it was when I was a student, but again, we're dealing with a different demographic. Without knowing the specifics, my intuition says that they now are probably from a higher social economic community. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that they have had access to certain ways of being in the world that were either foreclosed for us or limited. So me growing up in Atlanta, I grew up in a working class, poor environment. That wasn't unique when I was a student. For the most part, people had stories, anecdotal about growing up hard, whatever that's really supposed to mean. Students I get now, suburbs. It's not a bad thing, it's just a different reality. And so oftentimes, they're coming into a community of African-American men, majority African-American men, and they're smart. So what do you lose? You're no longer that guy. You're amongst those guys. And I think that creates a different dynamic, because one of the things you had, one of your attributes, if you will, was that you were the smart Black person. And I think when they come here now, it's a little different, because admissions has changed to the degree to which we may promote, advocate for higher academic performances from the students who may be coming to Morehouse now. But I think it's still variegated, as I said, which means we have some students who may not have performed at their highest in high school, but when they come to Morehouse, there's a certain je ne sais quoi about being in this environment where I have to be better. I don't know how to really explain it, but you can call it competition, trying to save face, but it literally cashes out by saying, I must do better, I must perform. So Morehouse has made theirs by creating an environment that's conducive for them for rediscovery, if you will. And so I think that's a beautiful thing to see. But it does come through that my students are from the suburbs. Every year I take the freshmen on a bus trip. I want them to understand how to get through and maneuver through Atlanta on public transportation. Well, I can tell you many of them have never been on public transportation in their lives, contrary to when I was in school. Most of us got around the world that way. And it's not a bad thing, but it demonstrates to me it's something more that's needed. It's not just the class, it's not just the dorm. We try to create a more holistic approach because there are differences in how their world has been made for them. And so we go through the city of Atlanta. I try to instruct them, when you see someone who may be unhoused, don't be afraid. Don't engage with trepidation that society may have informed you. Act yourself. And many of them have never been in these environments, in urban environments, as we euphemistically say. That means the cities. And so that's in a form of initiation, but it's all a part of the education. That's why I love it. All of this is formidable to the degree to which, how do I now take my studies in sociology, chemistry, physics, and try to get a sense of, does it matter to the world. And so the students we get now are very diverse. I think the value is that the admissions office still tries to create, or as they say, build a class that's going to represent the diversity of what it means to be black in the world. And I think they do it intentionally. It's not by happenstance, and it's needed. And we should always welcome that level of diversity, because what we want to say is for every Cam, there should be an Ilya Davis who struggled through high school, and that we bring them together, and the exchange is the dynamism that creates what we call the Morehouse mystique. And we don't try to create a univocal voice about Morehouse. Every student has a right to define and be Morehouse the way they want it to be. Now, what we may have in common is this commitment to social justice, social change, and this extra engagement that is beyond myself. The world needs me, and I want to be a performative as well as an active agent in making and exacting those changes.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I want to open this to the both of you all. And we talk about the shifts that has happened with the demographics of students that we're profiling and that we're seeing now, but I want to go into the why behind it. I want to go into, like, what is that from your perspective in your role and your role, what is that pinpointed moment in time in which we can say, like, this is where Morehouse is going with the nature of our admissions process? Are we using data from our first year experience courses to inform of saying this is the type of student that we want to profile now, or we looking at our admissions rates competitively across the nation and saying this is where society has placed the standard for black men? So I just want to pinpoint, like, where is it that we have made the shift and say, okay, at this point, this is what the college will do?
It's a great question. The shift, right, slow but steady, but I think the objective, right, and the focus of how you see Morehouse stems from an angle of seeing Morehouse through the student's lens, right? So I think what's changed is, instead of thinking objectively about, you know, what it is that we want a student to do, we are taking more of the narrative, right, through, you know, the marketing office and the comms office to really find those stories that then stick out for us then to talk to other students about students that mirror their behavior, as Professor Davis talked about, right? So I think that's a nuance that is happening. Pair that with the desire for people to see Morehouse not just as an HBCU, right, as great as that is, but to really see it beyond this concept of just being an institution for black men. Really seeing it as a pivotal institution to lead leaders, right? A space and a place where you could only find 400 plus African-American men predominantly that are successful in the way that they are, that are gonna graduate at that rate and be able to do things that have never been done before, right? And so we start talking about the statistics, right? We know them, right? Morehouse College, the #1 producer of African-American men who go on to earn a degree from Harvard Business School, Harvard Law School, right? A top feeder school for graduate schools, right? Number 4 or 5, it's the top HBCUs. We know them, but when we really look at Morehouse and the reality and the realization that it's an institution that is really of its own kind, you have to start to ask the question, what students deserve to be in these spaces, and then how do we go find them, while at the same time not change the fabric of Morehouse and not change the fabric of the student. And it's all of those pieces that have to sort of sink in for us then to go find the right students to come here. And so when we look at the Morehouse of the future, it's one where there's more opportunities to find students that are desiring an online education, more opportunities for students who desire to kind of want to know what this space looks like without actually physically having to come, right? It goes past just a tour experience. There has to be ways to really kind of take what those ideals and those sort of mystical or mythical concepts that we know exist here and really find ways to talk about them in a way where we're not giving them everything, right? Because you ain't gonna know your NSO experience till you get here.
Until you're here.
But there has to be ways to start to show them that, hey, just this little glimmer, just this little diamond is sparkling over here. And if I can show you that, man, don't go to another school. You really need to be thinking about Morehouse, right? And so I think more parents are seeing that as time continues, despite the decisions that are made throughout the country too.
You as well. What has your experience been like just in that pinpoint moment of seeing students change and the way in which they're moving about the college?
My initial issue is, I'll take these terms from one of my favorite spirituals. How come we here? How did you get here? Because it's important for you as a student to rethink where you are in the world. You have created a sense of who you are, 16 to 18 years, pretty much the average. But now you're here in this sacred place. And I normally refer to it as a sacred place. And not so much that it can't somehow account for the foibles and maybe even contradictions, but it's sacred because of what it has the capacity to produce in you, in the student. So my question for the student is, are you open to possibilities? This is a very unique time we live in. Everyone goes through it. This is your time, student. You have to make the decisions. If you're going to protest certain social ills, it's your time. I had mine. It's your turn to make a decision. So how do we cultivate some of the virtues? Democracy, fairness, dignity, respect for others. And so every student I engage, that's the beginning. Once you answer those, now we know how we now are going to inform you through our liberal arts curriculum. And then they begin to understand, that's why I have to take English if I'm a physics major. That's why I take religion and philosophy and sociology. Yes, because you decided in your response to my query that all of these things will help codify what it means for you to be a human being, but more importantly, your contribution to the virtues I just articulated. So how do we cultivate a better democracy? One that incorporates the diversity of what it means to be a human being without marginalizing or subjugating. And so for me to see a student at Morehouse College means you accepted Morehouse and we accepted you because you were willing to change. You were willing to cultivate and refine your humanity. Because again, there is no singular way of being in the world, but we should never be excited or receptive to mediocrity. That is, you're always saying to yourself, I'm at Morehouse, maybe because of the historical representations that I see, but more importantly, because I see myself not doing better, but as well as they have done. And I'm in an environment that's going to always encourage me to do more than what I anticipated when I went to college. So when Brother Gumm says, you have to say to yourself, where am I? What do I want from myself? What contribution do I wish to make to humanity? Morehouse is an environment moving forward that's going to be more and more focused on trying to create the best liberal arts education. You came to Morehouse, you wanted to major in physics, but you took a course in religion and you decided this is going to be my intellectual pursuit, not because of any dogmatic relationship to religion, but because religion seems to be a venue through which you can interpret the human experience and build upon that. So this has to be our movement forward. How do we entrench ourselves in our humanity? That is, how do we now decide to live in the world in such a way that we're always cultivating, always refining, and that we never forget that the reason of our existence has to be informed by the way that people live their lives. So the lived experience is always the fundamental foundation upon which we now draw our energy as well as engage our intellectual activities. So we should always be thinking practically about, I understand, nuclear physics. I might understand, certain philosophical concepts. But at the end of the day, will this inform the world in such a way that the world becomes more humane?
Mike, I'm actually glad that you brought up other institutions. And, anything about a Morehouse man, he will talk about his school through and through. And I recognize that that's the position that we're in as a college, but also want us to think critically about how has this ruling affected our other institutions, right? Every institution will not cater towards the education of Black men. We have our neighbors across the street who have a completely different mission and focus. So, and I could pitch it to either one of you all, what is the thought process of other institutions that we're seeing because of the rulings, other HBCUs specifically? Like, what is going on with the data, or what are we seeing trends-wise because of the fact that affirmative action is ruling by the Supreme Court?
I mean, they see a spike, some schools, but we have to be cautious with respect to correlating where they assume causation. So we can correlate these things, okay, but causation, there are too many variables that I think play a role. Well, one of the roles, as I said earlier, it's a moral issue. Schools that want black students will accept and get them. To hide behind a SCOTUS decision is a problem. And I think many people have done that. And now they get to use the language of, I can't use race. Of course you can. It's a matter of you being very clear about the type of intellectual environment. But to your point, that there has been a spike. Many schools have claimed we're getting more applications now. Well, there are many other variables, such as people have a little more money in the bank account now. That helps, because as we know, most of the HBCUs don't have the same money available to students as some of the historically white colleges and universities. And I'm creating this just to say we have to be very cautious about, if the numbers begin to dwindle, what type of causal link do we claim? So say, for instance, some schools in the country now, their numbers have gone down. How do you account for it? My position is we can always account for the number of applications by producing the best student we can. So irrespective of what SCOTUS does, irrespective of a kid saying, I want to be a part of that community because I may not feel at home, we should not be the option because you don't feel at home. We should be the option because we do a damn good job of educating, at least introducing education and what that means to your life. And so I'm very cautious in this regard, because you should not be the choice because other options aren't available. It should be the choice because we're the best choice. And so I have to tell students, we don't desire to be a consolation prize. If you don't feel it, don't come. Morehouse is not for everyone. It is for someone who wants to engage a robust intellectual environment, wants to grow, wants to be critical and analytical of themselves and the communities they are affiliated with. That for me is the motivation. But I guarantee you, if you look at some of the historically white colleges that wanted more black students, they're still getting them. They still get the number. And matter of fact, the numbers probably have gone up because you have programs now where many of our black students get full tuition based on their financial or demographic structures, and we can't do that. So it represents their willingness to at least say, listen, if your family makes less than $300,000 a year or $200,000 a year, we'll cover the tuition, right? So no one is accounting for those institutions. I think what we've done is we conflated all schools, so the numbers will come out a little asymmetrical. Even with HBCUs, all HBCUs aren't liberal arts colleges. So you have to adjust for that. How many students want or desire a liberal arts education, which means how many of our high school students are coming out wanting to major in sociology, political science, and so forth? Yeah. Well, you wouldn't apply to certain historical black, you wouldn't apply to certain whites. So I just think we need to be cautious, because we don't want to rest easy with the other people don't want you. That happened in the 60s. So part of what happened in the 60s was those other schools said, now we'll take you. We lost a lot of our students' influx. 1967, 68, I think some of the most elite schools in the country had their largest influx of black students because they said, okay, we want you, come. Morehouse should never be in a position where the choice is just because someone else wants you versus I want Morehouse for the reasons that you can articulate.
Absolutely. And I want to shift the conversation towards the future. We love to say behind closed doors that Morehouse has existed for 157 years. What are we going to do as employees of the college to ensure the legacy and the continuation of Morehouse for another 157 years? And so when we talked about it earlier about the different profiles and the students that are coming now, Mike, what are you seeing from your end with trends as it relates to acceptance rates And then how does those trends kind of carry over into retention? Like, what is the future man of Morehouse if I'm interested in coming to the institution? Like, what should I be expecting? I have a 28 on my ACT. Can I still get into the college? Is it getting more competitive? Where are we now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so I think Morehouse in the future, at least the selection process, right, is a process that involves AI. It's a process that involves looking at data trends. It's a process of actually maybe even being a little bit smaller, right, but more selective. And part of that goal, right, is that it has to fit in a way where it's made up of both types of student, right, from any socioeconomic background. It's not just pinged or tunneled to you having to have certain expectations of certain things. It's more of what Professor Davis is talking about, where can this student, right, do well here, right? You can't talk about admissions without talking about retention. And the focuses of admitting a student on the front end, to me, has to shift with more of an emphasis on how do we retain the student that is coming in. So it's a more real conversation, right? It might be more opportunities to engage parents in different types of seminars. It might be more emphasis on making sure that we have an international space so that students feel comfortable and there's a culture that exists here for students where we can get back to the early 90s, where there was a 40 or 30% rate of students coming from, what the president currently calls Morehouse Beyond Borders, different spaces and places that are not in the U.S. We have to get to that. And part of that means we have to meet the trend, right? We also have to meet the students where they are. So if we're not engaged in the ways of utilizing social media platforms, we're going to become non-existent. So those are the things that I want to see us move towards. And I think a Morehouse student of the future is a student that knows the percentage in which his likelihood to attend Morehouse. And that percentage is then calculated based upon certain aspects that we gave the student through an AI platform, through a communication, through an opportunity where he got a chance to touch the campus. So that then it's more of seeing the student for what they're worth. There might be some opportunities for interviews that could come back. There could be some other emphasis to really target why the student wants to be at Morehouse, that in order to shake the ruffles, having a 28 composite ACT test score only gives me one attribute. There might be more beyond the idea of just looking at the student for some, 4-piece criteria that then says, congratulations, you've been admitted. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to grow. I think it's going to be engaging more faculty on the front end. It might be engaging the provost in different ways and finding new nuances to better shape Morehouse as we kind of look at the near future. I think we'll grow positively. I think our application count is going to grow, significantly. And so we don't want to change too much, right? But we definitely want to look at nuances that are going to be a part of us. And as students select other institutions, they're going to be asking questions that are more pivotal to what is the opportunity for a student that majors in business to get into these degree programs? What is the opportunity if I major in philosophy, that the reality is that I could be a lobbyist or be an attorney? So they're coming with more direction. We just got to meet that.
I like that. Ilya, you are seeing the student experience, one from the admitted student process, then you finally see their journey during new student orientation, and then you also see these same students again 4 years later, assuming that they did it in 4 years. You see them 4 years later as they are seniors preparing to go out into the world. So from that transition from admitted student to first year experience, and then continuing on to their senior year, how have you seen their journey shift and change? Like, how impactful has FYE been on the way in which they think, they act, their habits? Like, why is FYE so integral for the college?
So I will look at the course that I lead, Freshman Orientation, which meets every Tuesday. And it's a program that was begun close to 90 years ago. One of the famous moments that Benjamin Mays had every Tuesday, as I do now, engaging the students on various topics. And it gives them an advantage. And I think Morehouse is unique amongst other schools in this regard, and that is, what does it mean to be in college? What does it mean to pursue education as a value and as an activity of the soul and of the person? And so I think I watched these students over those 4 years. Even when you were a student here, I could talk about the Cam that I met when he began, the Cam when he finished. And I think we usually like the outcome. Why is that? Not so much of what we did to Cam as what we afforded him and what we afford all students. And that is, they come to Morehouse, 17, 18. Interestingly enough, they know everything. They know who they wish to be. They know the type of life they would like to lead. But the interaction in and out of class, on Brown Street and other places, having that interrogated by your classmates, professors who care enough not to reduce their engagement to classroom engagement, they will pull up to you. Not just what are you doing out here on Brown Street? No, while you're on Brown Street, are you still considering what life could offer you? And so as I see them matriculate through Morehouse during those 4 years, the students who have taken this experience seriously come to me senior day, the day of graduation. They did it this year and every other year. You know what? I get it. I get it. And it's not about that they're graduating valedictorian or with certain Latin honors. Is that when they've said they now get it, that is, I was supposed to be considering my humanity. That was my job. And whatever discipline I find myself located, it's supposed to be applicable to that. And so when students leave here and go to graduate school, I celebrate because I saw somebody who thought they were going in one direction, and because of the experiences that they had and how they fortified their relationships with one another, it produces a Cam and others who now say, you know what? I get it now. My job is not over. Morehouse initiated my interest and taught me that the fundamental aspects of what it means to be a human are never foreclosed. They're always open. It's always creating new opportunities for me. So I may do this for a while, but guess what? When I graduate, I should feel good about the fact that I represented myself, my family, and Morehouse College with the highest level of integrity. And so watching students go through Morehouse, as you intimated, some don't finish in 4 years. But one thing that I promote through freshman orientation, of course we would like to see you begin and end within that time frame. But don't ever lose your way by thinking because that did not happen in a successive way, that it's over. You finish in your time. So I don't allow students to say, I'm a graduating senior. Don't do that. People have different trajectories of life. It might have been emotional, it might have been psychological, it might have been financial, whatever the reasons may have been, but we want to constantly embrace that individual by staying the course and graduating. Of course, 4 years, but in lieu of that, you must be concentrated on the fact that you will complete Morehouse College. And the end point is this: when they cross that stage, as emotional as students get, I again tell them that's not the end. That is your indication that I know better, I will do better, I'll become better. That's what it means to cross that stage. It's your birthing, if you will. It serves as a sort of metaphor of you coming forth by day and night. And now you're representing to the world, here I am. Make of me what you wish, but trust me, I am clear about what I should be doing in life. And I think that's the beauty of going through here in that period of time.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add a little bit to what you're just saying. And I find so much beauty in the word commencement, right? As we think about to commence is the idea of that you're beginning something, right? But we celebrate a commencement, which also signifies the conclusion of your 4-year experience. So I always want to, take that time as we analyze words and what they really mean. It's just beautiful to know that your experience as a student here is almost like a cycle. I found myself personally here starting as a freshman and then graduating, but still having that love for the college to say like, wait, I'm not done. I need to still serve this Mother Morehouse and still contribute because I know what this space is and I know where this space is going, but also learn that, to your point about recognizing your humanity, I learned that as a student. And so I want to ask this question to both of you all. simply because I know part of the answer, but I want you all to go deeper into it. How integral are the current students to you, Mike, for the admissions process? I know you have your ambassadors. And then also for you, Ilya, how have students been integral when it comes to freshman orientation? More specifically, the upperclassmen that are administering guidance to the current students that are going through freshman orientation. So we can kick it off with you first, Mike.
Man, that's a great question, Cam. So brotherhood, right? That's what keeps coming back and it just cycles itself, right? What does it mean to be a brother? You know, I think the closest bond is having a twin brother, one would argue, right? Somebody that look like you, walk like you, talk like you, he's your roommate. But what I find interesting about Morehouse in and of itself is I've never seen a bond as close to brotherhood as having a twin brother like Morehouse College. And so when I think about that question and I think about being a part of admissions and the sort of the ways in which students navigate spaces and organizations and groups here, even down to, you know, being in your freshman hall or your freshman house. You know, you find these ways to engage and interact, and you see the quality of the brother next to you. And something in that, and Professor Davis talked about that earlier, this sort of competitive nature to not hurt your brother, but to really push your brother. Who is pushing you, right? There's that strive of commencing, right, that happens even on the recruiting phase, right? They're getting into groups prior to even coming into the class. And so they're finding ways to bond. And I think that bonding experience, right, is what's unique at Morehouse. It's that you're finding you while also helping your brother find himself, while being a part of an organization or a group that you know nothing of. And as many people might say, oh, I know Morehouse is the quickest, as you say it, is the quickest you really end up saying it, if you really get it, that, you know, I know nothing of Morehouse, right? And you find yourself trying to fine tune that. And so I think on the admissions end, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for guys that want to be a part of this environment. But we're also looking for guys that, as Professor Davis mentioned earlier, that are not afraid to expose themselves, to be vulnerable, I know he would say, to be willing to ask for help, right? To be willing to say, you know what, I'm not perfect or I'm on a spectrum, but I'm here and I want to be a part of this environment. And I care so much that I want to see myself in this place, that in 4 years, right, I'm coming out of here as a changed person. And, you know, whatever experience you might have gone through, there's something special about Morehouse that I believe this place is the only place that can shape you in that way to do that.
Brother Illya Davis, Brother Michael Gumm, I definitely appreciate you all for coming to Illuminated today. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to follow Morehouse College on our Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, the Morehouse College YouTube channel to find more Illuminated videos. Thank you for your time. I'm Cameron Nolan. I've been the moderator for today. You all are phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you.